Hello, everyone. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J. Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. If you're tuning in for the first time, please feel free to leave any comments or questions you have in the comment section here on the Facebook page. And I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little confused with my own technology here. That happens sometimes at this age. Um, so, questions or comments for our guests, please, put them in here and you'll see me look to the side and check it out. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Our guest, Jessica Formicola's new cookbook, just released May 24th, called Beef It Up, offers 50 mouth-watering recipes for ground beef, steaks, stews, roast, and ribs. Jessica is the creator of the successful Savory Experiments.com, a trusted food and lifestyle blog. She appears regularly on national networks providing cooking demonstrations and entertaining ideas. She has contributed to Parade Magazine, The Daily Meal, MASHED, Better Homes and Gardens, and has partnered with over 100 national food brands on product releases and cooking tutorials. A psychotherapist that has gone off script and gone culinary rogue with huge success. Good afternoon, Jessica, and welcome.
Hi, Dara. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, and I thank you for squeezing us in because you're doing this whole media tour from home and cooking demonstrations. You just came off of one. So I thank you very much. So what else is on your plate today?
Well, I meet with you, and then you're actually the end of my day, which is fantastic. So I've got all the time in the world to talk it up, beef it up with you.
That's great. We're going to, chew the fat or maybe not the fat. We'll see. We'll see. Why food versus psychotherapy?
Oh, goodness. That's a really good question. So I loved practicing, and I'm guessing a lot of your listeners are here in Baltimore. I worked at Sinai Hospital for many, many years practicing with addiction and dually diagnosed patients. And I had some personal issues. I was dealing with fertility treatment, and I needed something to do in my life that did not have to do with work. And food had always been a passion of mine. And I taught myself cooking techniques at home. Sunday was still a big family dinner day. We come from Italian families, my husband and I, and we'd always have friends over. And they started asking for my recipes. So I started writing them. I Googled how to start a blog one day. And it started growing. People found me to be relatable and approachable because I wasn't this professionally trained chef, and I shared my failures as well as my successes and taught myself along the way. And it slowly grew, and I realized that I really, really enjoyed it. And when my daughter was born, which was almost 5 years ago now, I decided to take the jump into doing this full time just to give myself a little bit of flexibility. But I do miss practicing. I was also a college professor at CCBC, the local community college, and I've thought from time to time about going back to teaching. So we'll see what happens.
Well, was there a culinary inspiration? Was there a mother, a grandmother? Who cooked in your family that inspired you?
Mostly my mother. My mother was a good cook. She is still learning, aren't we all, right? It's something you're never perfect at. But she only ever prepared the same meals over and over again. I love my dad, but he really is a creature of habit. And I started experimenting with food in high school. I remember going over to a friend's house and they served salmon. I had never had salmon before just because my parents didn't
Yeah.
really eat salmon.
Well, I
So
understand.
started
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Um, I just explained to the audience that we met probably 8 years ago. That was pre-children. You were creating new recipes. I had the Dining Dish blog. And it's funny to watch the evolution of our group, what each one has gone off and done. And there's, I think, two more generations that have come up that are now, quote, influencers. You have a working relationship with the Certified Angus Beef Group. What makes Certified Angus Beef a desire, the better cut of beef? Why certified Angus beef?
I started working with certified Angus beef brand probably about 6 or 7 years ago, right around the same time I met you. And they're actually a brand of beef. So one of the things that they do is they employ cattle ranchers that are all American family owned and run cattle ranches. And that to me was really important. I was able to go to their test kitchens. I was able to visit the cattle ranches. I know the families that provide this beef, and they are so dedicated and respectful of the process of cattle ranching, of the land, of the beef that they provide. And it was inspiring. It was one of the things that really made me love it. And they have several different things that they look for in beef that make it a requirement to be certified Angus beef brand. I won't bore you with all of them, but they're very strict, high standards. So I know that when I go to the store, if I see that logo, I know that this is a quality beef that was raised here in the US by a family with their own family hands, and that it's something that I can count on.
Right. Before I forget, I'm going to come back to beef it up. Let's see. There we go. There we go. We're twinsies. Okay,
Lindsay.
great. We'll pop it up again in a couple moments. Um, so in your book, you talk about, and on your blog, your lifestyle food blog, which anybody can find at savoryexperiments.com, you talk about the 4 S's pillars, things that people should know and use when cooking. Do you want to describe that a bit?
Sure. So it's the 4S philosophy. We look at salt, seasonings, sauces, and swaps, which are just substitutions. It was funny because for a long time I was really trying to figure out what my unique point of view was. And it was sitting in front of me the entire time. And it wasn't unique at all. It was just kind of packaging it differently and helping home cooks kind of spur that, okay, what do I do here? And look at the 4 S's. There's almost always something you can do. Savory Experiments and this book really encourage home cooks to build confidence in the kitchen and experiment with things. And I really want people to customize their recipes. I don't want you to follow a recipe exactly. I want you to be the person that eyeballs it, adds a little bit more garlic, and says, you know what, my family would really like smoked paprika. And as soon as you become comfortable with these 4 S's, you automatically take these maybe regular family meals and you can elevate them to a new restaurant style category just by adding a sprinkle of flaky sea salt, or maybe taking the sauce and putting it on the bottom, or adding a sauce to begin with, or a different spice, or knowing when's the best time to add that spice. So it's really about teaching people more so than just following a recipe.
Right, it's giving them the tools. And Jen, my producer, and I were talking about it's unfortunate as to the times we're going through and supply shortages and the increase in price. Um, Costs for meat, is there any cut that you can recommend to people that might be a little bit more cost effective? I know that you cover quite a bit of the cuts of beef, but is there one that you think people might go to more to try to save a bit of change on the beef?
Sure, ground beef, hands down, ground beef. I think ground beef got a bad rap, and people think hamburgers, and then they kind of go, okay, what else can I? Hamburgers are chili. What else can I do with it? And there are so many things you can do with it. One of the questions I get the most frequently is that when people cook ground beef, they find that it either gets kind of gray or rubbery. And I found that they're just not cooking it correctly, which is funny because you're like, how can you mess up ground beef? Well, you can mess it up. You can. We like to really brown ground beef. And there's an entire section in the book about how to properly
Right.
do that with enough high heat to get a good, almost char on it, a good bark on it. And that's what's going to hold in all of the juices and the moisture so that it doesn't get dry and rubbery, and really takes that browning flavor and infuses it into the rest of the dish, whatever it is you're making. There are, I think, 8 or 9 recipes in the book that use ground beef. A little goes a long way. And a lot of these recipes they do, even we use a lot of top sirloin. Only about a pound goes into my beef pad thai, and that along with fresh veggies, which I call it my vegetable crisper dish, because you can take anything that's left in your vegetable crisper and throw it on in. With rice noodles, that 1 pound of top sirloin, which is a very economically priced piece of meat, can feed a family of 4 or 5.
Right, right. Let's see, let me read a question. Are there any steps taken to ensure the animals are humanely slaughtered? What is the difference between the farmers you work with and the ones considered family farms?
So the farms I do work with are considered family farms. I humane slaughtering is just considered to be quick. It's a very quick process, and that's generally how it works. They are generally slaughtered. They go to a processing plant. They're actually raised in a herd and go as a herd to the processing plant. These farmers have a good relationship with processing plants as well, and most of them are actually family owned and run, as well as what they call feed yards, which is where they're fed. And it is a quick process. They stun them. I don't want to get too into it because a lot of people, that's not their favorite
It's
thing to talk
uncomfortable.
about. It is.
Right.
It's uncomfortable, but I come from a family where if you're going to eat meat, the responsible thing to do is to know how it was raised and how it was processed and be comfortable
Right,
with that.
right. How long from start to finish did the book take you?
Oh gosh, it was really fast, Dara. So my literary agent contacted me. The publishers, Story Publishers, had previously published a book about chicken that was a single subject book about chicken. She knew, my literary agent, Sally, knew that I had a good relationship with CAB, Certified Angus Beef Brand, and said, hey, Jess might be a really good fit for you. So we had a Zoom call. I did a proposal, which took me 7 days for a 65-page proposal. And 2 weeks later, we had a contract. It took 4 months to write it, which is very short in cookbook times. Most of the time, it's about a year. I had more recipes than I knew what to do with. I started with 120 ideas and had to narrow it down to only
I remember
50.
seeing that. Yeah.
Yep. But I snuck in a couple of bonus recipes for sauces and compound butters. So I'm saying it's closer to 60. But it took 4 months to write and then several months to edit. It took us a week to photograph, and then it went off to the presses. So all in about a year and a half.
It's still fast. It's still very fast because you're sitting there and getting your friends and your people that you know through savoryexperiments.com, because you have a lot of associates there testing the recipes. I'm not going in any particular order with these questions. We talked about salt, and when I worked for Van Spices, I used to, I had Fleur de Sel, which is the most expensive salt, and then I had a gray sea salt, and then I had Hawaiian sea salt, and it went down the line to iodized salt. And I would make people taste it. They'd go from iodized down and taste it. And I think some people don't understand the flaky salt, which should be finishing, versus the other salts, kosher salt. And even kosher salt, Diamond is different than Morton's. You use pretty much half as much Morton's kosher salt than you would Diamond salt. Any advice on salt for people? And then I'm going to jump in here. Black pepper. I like black pepper, but sometimes I like that white pepper. There's a musty taste to it that I like that finishing. So have added about salt and pepper.
Well, salt, it's like people, salt and pepper. We're really going to talk about this. Yes, talk about this. I have done the same thing, Dara. I have all of these salts in my house and I put them out onto a little tray and I make people taste them, or with some very bland unsalted butter on bread, because not everybody just eats salt straight like I do. So I don't even have iodized salt in my house. I really find that it has a horrible metallic taste afterwards, and it just is too salty. It is, but it seems to be what most people cook with. My go-tos, I have both Morton's and Diamond in my house. You're very correct. The grain size is different. And I think until you visually see the difference in grain size, it's really hard for people to figure out why we use different ones. I also have fine sea salts, if I do need to use a fine salt, which I generally use more in baking and more a coarse salt, either sea salt or something else in cooking. I always sea salt, not the iodized salt. That's what I have. I even have sea salt in my salt grinders.
Right.
And then I always have a tub of Maldon sea salt on my table.
Counter.
I'm looking,
Yeah.
yeah, my counter. I'm looking at it, right? That's what I'm looking at. On the side for seasoning at the end of meals. I cannot tell you, there probably isn't a meal, even an appetizer or a lean cuisine, that does not get a sprinkle of flaky sea salt from me. And then I carry a tin of Travel Jacobson in my bag because I find that when I go out, one of the things that happens is that people don't have good salt. They have the iodized salt. People laugh at me, but then they start asking me, like, Jess, do you have your salt? And I do. I always have my salt. So one of the best ways to become to be a better home
Right.
cook is to understand all these differences. And the best way to do it is by doing a taste test at your own house. Buy them all, set them out in front of you, look at the differences, look at the difference in grain size, so you understand that if a recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of coarse kosher salt, and a lot of times you will see the writer specify that it's either Morton's or Diamond because there is such a difference in grain size there. Knowing what you're using and how big it is. And if you only have fine sea salt on hand, making sure you cut it in half, if not down to only 25% of what that recipe called for. Peppers too. Peppers, I find that white pepper has certainly a little bit more of a funkier taste to it, but it's also a milder pepper. I don't have white pepper in a pepper grinder at all times, but I do have a 3 peppercorn, a red, white, and black mix in one of my grinders, and then I usually have black. I do have ground white pepper or pre-ground, although I always tell people to grind your own. It gives so much more flavor if you grind your own whole spices. I can't go into that so much. I have spice grinders galore in my house because they just pack so much more flavor. And again, it's one of those things that I don't think home cooks realize, that and dried or pre-ground spices start to lose their potency at probably about 3 months. I only buy small containers of them if I'm using them, only small containers. And then I label the tops of them with the date that I opened it on. And I look at them regularly, and if they're past 3 months, I taste it. And if it's starting to lose its punch, I might double or even triple that ingredient in a recipe. And if it's lost its punch altogether, then we just figure out what a swap is, because it's just, there's no point.
Well, cinnamon is probably the one that loses its flavor and potency the fastest. And why does it lose a potency? It's the oils in it. They tend to dissipate. You were talking about your grinder. I have grains of paradise, pink, red, black, and white. And that's my grinder. It's all mixed up. And let me see, we're going to go down here a moment. Writing a recipe, when I went into the book with my friend Jeffrey, which was Yum Tasty Recipes, there is a certain way to write a recipe. And I think maybe you can advise people why they're reading the recipe the way that it is.
Well, there is, I'm going back to thinking exactly how my editor described it. We call it no surprises. So we want to start with no surprises, no jump to, oh my gosh, I need this or this special equipment. We want it to be right up front and apparent to the readers. I always give full times. So I get very annoyed with recipes when they say the prep time is 20 minutes, the cook time is 20 minutes, but somebody forgot to tell me that there's 2 hours of chilling time or an hour of resting time.
Right.
And always read the whole recipe first before you get started and before you even go to the grocery store. So as the home cook, that if they forgot to put that in there, that it's there. Then ingredients go in the order that they're used. And I think some people find that kind of funny too. If it's a beef recipe, shouldn't beef be first? Not necessarily if we're using something else first. If we're going to do the onions first, the onions go first, and then it gets broken down by the amount if they're all going in at the same time. I try to be really clear with my recipe writing. My readers at Savory Experiments, some of them are really advanced home cooks, but a lot of them are beginners and have
Right.
sent me wonderful emails saying, listen, I didn't know how to poach an egg. And some recipes will say, poach your egg, instead of saying, this is how you poach an egg. So I really try to break it down into steps and not assume that anybody knows how to do anything, because there's always somebody out there who's starting from step one. And that's okay, because they're learning. I love
Right.
that. I love people
Right.
learning.
Well, I think, I've always stressed, you can read the recipe before you go to the store. Read it once, read it twice, because I always miss something. Then I come home and I read it a couple of times, and I still can miss something. I don't know what it is. So just reading it once or a quick glance, folks, even the most seasoned cooks read the recipes multiple times.
And miss things.
Okay, and miss things, absolutely. Let's see. There's so many things in, I'm holding it up again, beef it up. There's a lot of talk about cuts of beef, grades of beef, whether being prime or choice or select or no roll. The only time I learned about no roll was when I was working for like a Cisco type company, and I had to learn, and I had charts on the beef. The difference, can you explain to people the difference between prime, choice, select? Just in a quick synopsis. It's in the book, and they can see the diagrams.
Yeah, very quick. I mean, prime is your top grade of beef, and generally it has to do with the marbling and the raising of the beef, everything down to the diet of the cattle while they were being raised. And there are people, the company that I've worked with before, they're called Tiffany Cattle Company, Tiffany Feed Company. They're folks actually have PhDs in making sure that the nutrition of the cattle that are being raised there is up to par with what a prime cow would have. Cows love grass and cows love corn. And corn is a starch. It's going to be what gives cattle a lot of those fatty marble striations. So when you're looking at prime, I always look for the fat content. You want to look for ribbons of marbleization, not huge pieces, just small ribbons. It should just very slightly white throughout the piece of meat. And as you go down the line, they lose that perfect striation. They get a little bit bigger. And it doesn't mean that those are bad cuts of meat. I personally, like, prime is great. It's what you're going to get at a lot of these high-end steakhouses, but it's not necessary. If you're just throwing a steak on the grill on Friday night, prime isn't necessarily what you need. I think the majority of people probably get choice, which is somewhere, in the middle. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad cut of meat, and neither is select. If you know how to properly season beef, especially salt, which is going to help tenderize it, or even getting out, I have a meat mallet here from my last recipe, getting out a meat mallet and actually physically tenderizing the meat, or using salt or marinade, and knowing the correct way to cook a cut is going to make any cut, regardless of what it is, taste amazing. And you'll very rarely find no roll in the store. We even debated putting it in the book, but my first chapter was actually twice as long as it is in the finished product, because I was so passionate about sharing about beef, and we just didn't have that much space. So, but what did get in is a fantastic chart on demystifying the cuts of beef. I think beef can be intimidating for the consumer when you go and it gets listed in different names depending on where you live geographically, and even by store. Around here, you can go to Giant and Wegmans and the same cut of beef is labeled two different things, and that can be really confusing. So people tend to pick swaps by the size and shape that they think they need for a recipe instead of the actual cut. This chart tells you which cuts you should swap it for, and also
Right.
the best way to prepare it, because unlike chicken or pork, where everything needs to be basically the same temperature and can be cooked similarly, different cuts of beef will shine using different cooking methods, whether it's a low and slow wet like a braise or a slow cooker, or a quick high heat like a stir fry, or or a grill, or if we need long, high heat, like we're smoking something. So it really breaks that down and demystifies it for you and tells you where that cut is coming from on the cattle. And I think that that, again, is something that helps you become a better home cook, regardless if you're using my recipe or somebody else's.
Right. It's funny. I marked down the comment in my notes here that you can walk into a store and, understanding Delmonico steak from, what am I looking at? Ribeye Delmonico. Slightly different part of the cattle, but not far away from each other. But
No.
it's hard. And then some places call Delmonico ribeye, and it can be from the ribeye, so it can be slightly confusing. And there's so much that we can talk about here. I'm going to go to my questions that I just sort of ask at the end of the show, because I know that you're such a good cook, and there's so many tools now, especially the air fryers and sheet pan cooking and Instapots. But what are your top 3 kitchen tools that you can't live without?
My first one isn't an actual cooking tool, but it's my mini food processor. It actually is the only small appliance that stays on my counter. I love it, whether it is salad dressings or chopping things up. It is my quick and easy tool, and it's dishwasher safe. I have 2 little kids. I can't hand wash all the things. I would say my air fryer, and my favorite way to use it is reheating pizza. Again, small kids. And it's funny, people think that we eat like amazing food every day because we're food writers. My general go-to on Friday night is still pizza. I'm still a real person with a real family. But air fryers are great for crispy Brussels sprouts. I use it for Brussels sprouts probably about once a week instead of deep frying them. I do have a pressure cooker. Best thing in there is probably pork butt. I love making a good pulled pork in there. But I can also cook noodles and do like awesome one pot meals. So those are probably my 3 go-tos.
Okay. I'll let you have those 3. I won't come and take them away from you.
Thank you.
If you could give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Try more food. I was at 18, probably not the most adventurous of eaters. And if I had started earlier and realized my desire for cooking earlier, don't get me wrong, I loved practicing psychiatry, but I am still paying off those student loans, and I would probably be doing this a lot more and a lot better if I had listened to myself back then and followed my dreams earlier.
Right. Okay. If you could wake up tomorrow morning and have a new talent, what would that new talent be?
I think you asked me this question, now I forget what my answer was. Probably to be a mind reader. I know people say that. Maybe that's not a great talent. Maybe I don't want to know what people are thinking.
Some say that could be a curse, but
I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, what is Dara thinking right now? She's thinking you didn't look at your questions before.
That's okay. I just try to give a heads up. So, sometimes people are a little taken back. I had Nick Maggieri on 2 weeks ago, and he says, enjoy cleaning up.
That's a great one. I mean, I'm thinking just maybe air of kindness, like not that I'm not a kind person, but that, again, 2 little kids, sometimes just being able to be a little bit more zen all the time.
What was your epic culinary fail? And we've all had them. So I like.
Goodness. I've had my first one, and I can't remember now if this is what I told you before too, but my first one was before I even had a blog. And I decided it's around that time that Julia, was it the movie came out? Me and Julia, or Julia and me, something like that. But I decided I was going to, of course, get the cookbook and start mastering the art of French cooking. And I decided that my first authentic beef bourguignon was going to be for a dinner party of 8, and did not read it ahead of time about how much time I needed, or that I probably should have made it the night before. And everybody had had a lot of wine by the time dinner got served around 10:30. It wasn't a massive fail, and I think everybody enjoyed it because they'd had so much wine. But I was just so flustered, and it really taught me that I need to prepare myself better, especially
Right.
if I'm going to use that recipe to entertain with. It was edible, but it was definitely not my best work.
Okay. Well, we won't tell anyone about that. That'll be our
I've
secret here.
I've gotten better.
Um, what's next for Jessica and Savory Experiments? What's on the
Goodness.
table?
Well, we just
Anything?
launched another site. We just launched bestdessertrecipes.com about 4 months ago. So that's coming along right now. You referred to yourself as a frustrated baker. So am I. Baking is not, I'm much more into the savory foods, savory experiments. Bestdessertrecipes.com might not be the best dessert recipes, but they're easiest best dessert recipes. So it's a lot of like cake box hacks and easy ways to make things look really gourmet and beautiful, but for the person that's kind of a lazy baker. So that's
Right.
been a lot of fun. I'm already in talks for another cookbook. I can't believe I'm saying that, considering I'm not even done with the Worldwide Media Tour now, but I've already been floating some ideas around with my agent of things we're going to do. And I also really enjoy TV. I've started doing more live TV and cooking show style videos on YouTube. I also had the opportunity to be a culinary producer on an HBO show recently that was a lot of fun. So I'm dipping my toes in and kind of seeing where I want to go. There's just not enough time in the day.
Right. Plus, you have your two beautiful kids, little girl, little boy.
Yep.
Um, okay, we're going to show it one more time. Beef It Up by Jessica Formicola. You can find out everything she's doing at savoryexperiments.com. And my final and last question is, what didn't I ask you that I should have?
I don't know. That's a really good question. When am I going to see you next? Because I haven't seen you in 3 or 4 years now
Well, at
because of
least
COVID.
two.
At
Two.
least two.
I'm around. You'll appreciate this, and everybody. I was asked to do the food styling of Pimlico Infield for Tom Colicchio and Marcus Samuelson, and I decided at 75 I was not going to go through that stress and turned it down.
Oh no.
Yeah, it would have been just too much, but I'll still do styling. That's how I met a lot of my friends, Sarah Moulton, Nick Maggieri, because I used to go to DC and food style for them. But the big things now, it's for the younger kids, ain't for me.
Well,
It's
keep
only
me in
so much.
mind.
I will keep you in mind, absolutely.
And you and I should
And
do lunch soon.
we will, yes, absolutely. I should come out and see the kids because the only time I saw them when they were in your tummy. And I didn't quite
Yeah.
see them. Right.
Yeah.
So everybody, you're listening to our little personal gossip. And I want to thank you, everybody. Beef It Up. Find it at Target. You can find it at Amazon.com. It's basically everywhere. She's got a good agent, a good PR agent as well. So beef it up. And we got Memorial Day. May is beef month. June is steakhouse month. So if you want some ideas on beef that maybe you didn't consider or just seasoning, look it up. And I thank you, Jessica. All the best, much continued success. And I'm going to go on with a couple notes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now. Okay, everyone. Next week's show. Ina Pinkney, chef, author, columnist, speaker. She is the breakfast queen. Her legendary Ina's Kitchen in Chicago was so fantastic that there's an award-winning documentary on Amazon called Breakfast at Ina's. Her cookbook is Ina's Kitchen, Memories and Recipes from the Breakfast Queen. She is engaging, exciting, so tune in for that. Just to let you know, join Jay Moore for a conversation with Greater Baltimore area business leaders and entrepreneurs on Tuesday, June 7th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. at the garage at our house on West 29th Street. The event will feature a moderated panel Discussions led by Gary Stein, plus time to network and schmooze. Guests will hear from some of the area's most successful business and community leaders about their journeys into business and entrepreneurship. Featured speakers are Brett Cohen, Kitchen Saver, Emma Snyder, the Ivy Bookstore, Jason Perlow Home Team, Matt Levinson, Sal Levinson and Son, and Thibaut Manikin, Sewell Development. You must register in advance. It's all free. So it's jmoreLiving.com/event/Jmore Presents JBiz. It's all business. I think if you just look up events and the date, you'll find all the details to register. Again, that is free. As always, we appreciate when you watch the show. We thank you so much for watching the Food Enthusiast. If you need to reach me, you can reach me. The email is food@jmoreliving.com. My social is @DaraCooks. The show will be up on J More Living's Facebook page and website, jmoreliving.com. We so appreciate you sharing the show with friends and family. It helps it to grow and keeps me on air. Feel free to go back into the archives and watch past shows. We've had some great guests and interesting guests. So until next week, may your plates always, always remain full.